The awakened ones. Awake to a new reality. Part I. According as it is written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear, unto this day. Romans 11:8. Recently, I was asked a very interesting question on how a person can be convinced, or at least bring about a thought of interest regarding the state of awareness that the prevailing reality is indicating that it is not what it used to be. Greetings. My beloved and dearest readers, the above question does have much legitimacy since currently humanity is confronting an unprecedented period in which our conscience is being revolutionized. Undoubtedly, you have become aware that our current reality is not what it used to be, at least for some people. This cosmic trend has shown that our existence as well as our environment is going through some unexpected changes, some being subtle and others very radical. Presently, this atmosphere is filled of emotional and spiritual confusion that has bewildered a part of our society. It may seem too unnatural to say the least, but its existence was prognosticated throughout the Holy Scriptures and it should not be a surprise. However, it has become just that, a world not only in confusion but also disorganized, resulting in spooky, emotional attitudes, and of course, a sense of spiritual disintegration. These, perceived dysfunctional principles were unheard of during our ancestors' lives. In fact, their lives consisted to be one of a trend toward a cohesive existence and of a good nature, at least in principle for so many individuals, even if daily activities would have been one of discomforts, pain, or uncertainty. However, such ideology persevered for a long time. It provided a sense of hope and spiritual guidance for so many people, even it may have been short-lived. Such operative conscience programs seemed to indicate failure, but they persisted in continuing to adhere with such devotion nevertheless. It took courage to say the least. In some respect, their efforts were commendable. As the new century came around, the populace of the 21st century continued to adhere and applied the same conscience principles of the past in fear that a radical change of conscience could jeopardize the current principles of the American conscience autonomy, our quality of being self-governing. However, all that changed in a clear sky of a Tuesday morning on September 11, 2001. The old principle became absolute and could no longer exist, for a new conscience trend was not only necessary but mandated. It became ineffective that unforgettable day, or at least impractical in some of the daily routines we used to rely on to maintain cognitive cohesiveness. Simply, what once worked somewhat perfectly, it would no longer work, and from that day a new perspective warranted immediate action, and on December 21, 2012, a new, more realistic and effective conscience forum began to emerge, which initiated a new mental cohesiveness. It was a new reality in which affected things could become more applicable toward new tangible concepts of understanding how we, humanity, fit in a new ideology or existence far beyond the mundane world we were used to contemplate. Currently, since that day in December 2012, we embarked on what I call upgrading consciousness, and have replaced the old paradigm model in which humanity seemed to exist for one simple purpose: conscience impairment, in which we found ourselves in a state of conscience slavery, depriving us of conscience sovereignty, our supreme divine right. The question that has become predominantly during this current conscience transformation is who benefited from such principle and who or whoever is so much against its establishment. That is the core of this article. Let's begin with the notion of the Holy Scripture passage above. It seems to indicate that we should consider twofold conditions. 1. That God brought purposely a population into a stage of unawareness of their current reality. 2. It describes a degree of castigation. For what purpose, you may ask? Maybe it stemmed from disobedience resulting in a punitive act, or for a more severe offense. In either case, it depicts bringing about unawareness to either notion. In my opinion, this is the result of a severe misbehavior or complete disregard for a prescribed set of laws or conditions. In either case, no matter how it can be interpreted, slumber is a principle of conscious unawareness disguised as a dream state, like in which the individual is made aware of a pertinent warning condition specifically to reveal behaviors in which specific circumstances are given or shown, allowing the individual to experience them in an alternate state of consciousness, not only minimizing or avoiding physical bodily harmful that otherwise in an awareness stage could be very detrimental and exhaustive, to say the least. Such stages of unconscious awareness are very beneficial to deal with all sorts of issues, problems, or dilemmas that can obscure our ability to deal with them. Simply, it sure beats dealing with it awake. We all have dreamed. It is a natural process for all humans. These conditions are part of what our conscience must endure to either bring reason or balance to an individual. However, we cannot ignore that slumber, dreaming, or coma is a principle from where there is no escape or antidote available to avoid its factor in our lives. Such is the reality we, humanity, must endure. Certainly, we are on the cusp of troublesome days. We cannot ignore the various acts of both natural and personal are influencing our scope of a life we once considered to be natural, and as each day passes we acknowledge more and more that this is not to be so and is becoming more frightened each day. There is no subtlety in all that is taking place. In fact, it all seems to be rising to a tragic climactic end. It is not to say that I am indicating all is going to be catastrophic or calamitous, but I am emphasizing an awareness in which each individual must exercise and give priority to at some point very soon in determining how his or her response would change the path of humanity. The effects of the last 4 years clearly have depicted an urgent need to action before all things collapse beyond repair. In this case, it seems most of the nation's inhabitants are at odds in which this nation direction should turn. Such acute ambivalence is very troublesome since unity is absent from our existential domain and the opposite is prevalent in all we do. Therefore, we must recognize that because of such separatism, God has become the executor of all that is necessary to not only disrupt but dismantle our separatism attitude that is deeply harming democracy. But why, you may ask? The answer lies in our current spiritual disposition. Our habitual temperament and its tendency to avoid spiritual solidarity is just but one of the major infractions before God. What is most troublesome is that in the last 100 years we have resolved to not only disrespect God but have deliberately brought confusion and disorder in the spirituality of mankind. In fact, in the last 3 decades we have, our nation especially, interrupted and impeded spiritual progress by introducing so-called spiritual movements resembling spiritual bonding, but in reality their purpose has been to break apart not only our emotional state but also our spirituality. I call this a period of dissimulation. It has been effective for it has invaded just about every aspect of our lives. You find it in the hall of justice and social organizations, and even in our sacred pavilions of prayers and solitude. These grievous principles that apply to our current reality and the stand humanity has accepted so boldly, in which exercising spiritual ignorance is an acceptable condition, is not only irresponsible but also detrimental to our existence. It seems our gregarious stand with these sort of individuals has decayed our stand before God to a point that it has brought upon each one of us a questionable shadowing of our divine greatness. Such acts of disobedience and contempt has for end, spiritual malice, antagonistic and hostile ideals in which just about every human has experienced at least once, except we can observe it more prevalent in the last 4 years. In all cases, the outcome is one of either a final imminent demise in which exile is imminent or cessation of existence. The Holy Scriptures is full of such outcomes. Ever wonder where is our nation on that scale? Or better yet, where is the whole planet at this time? We know that such principles of disobedience brought deadly repercussions along with hazardous existence and ultimately a complete eradication as a final judgment. So, the question for us today is, or should be, what is going to happen to us if we continue on the journey of spiritual arrogance? The answer is a simple one: let's turn toward God. Would that be possible in today's societies? The answer is within each of us, believe it or not, and it should be a worldwide effort also. The beginning is simple, it entails each one of us acting at a time making the difference. Where does it have to begin? Definitely in America. That is why the Counterfeit Dark Forum has made for priority all kind of resources, embodied all the principles and aspects of our daily lives. It has subverted in just about every political, social, and economic forum. Just observe what has happened to our news, music, and movie media, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. Today, our society is lacking identity. We are existing in a subway filled of deceptions, elusive promises, promoting greed and injustice, but that is but a gram of weight of a much larger pie. Such an atmosphere currently is depicting a state of spiritual idleness in which simple everyday emotional reasoning would be almost non-existence. It seems that alongside the exercising power, we have been for the last 3 decades, becoming like a wound that denies healing no matter what efforts are made. Just conceptualize an atmosphere in which our ancestors believed and sacrificed for so much seems as now being old-fashioned and irrelevant. That is the life most of humanity dwells in, and within that principle are many others lagging behind without purpose or reason. Can it continue? The Holy Scriptures clearly define not only that it cannot be, but assures us that intervention and actions will be enacted at a point before all things collapse. Are we at this point right now? The answer is no. Thanks to the Supreme Creator, We are at the beginning of a major change in which our conscience will emerge with a complete structure in which all of the malevolent virtues of greed, jealousy, fears, hatred, envy, and its subsidiaries will be eradicated, and a peaceful utopia will exist on this marvelous planet known throughout the galaxy as the Pearl. Of course, it will not happen overnight. Our conscience, especially our ego, has had ample time to solidify its mastery over humanity. Its demise will come by chipping away small pieces at a time. It will begin when each individual interprets how he sees himself as a participant of a new conscience, and not in what society's influence affects his cognitive abilities and mental processes. For example, right now, what happens in another part of the world is meaningless to an individual here in America. Most cannot fathom that a conflict or some disagreements of others on the other side of the planet will affect him, even thought. All things sooner or later reverberates in all aspects of humanity's existence. This has been a mental universal law in which currently many cannot comprehend or accept that what happens over there, it will affect over here sooner or later. Look at the example of the conflict in Europe and the Middle East. It has affected every aspect of our lives. We may not experience the pain, despair, and sorrow these two conflicts have caused in our society as it has caused to the affected inhabitants, but it has, in many other forms, affected the cohesiveness of our lives here in our nation. These two conflicts have demoralized our concept of right and wrong. In other words, we cannot clearly delineate what has been clearly for our ancestors understood to be right or wrong. If we could have had a harmonious society, we would have interceded in bringing about a populist mandate that any illicit involvement of our nation to a frugal conflict would not be in the interest of the people. Our society would have been in a better state of harmony rather than the pessimism we are now. It all seems, when seen under a microscope of the virtues of truth, reasoning, and common sense, the fraud and deception of political arena in November 2019 would have not occurred so obviously. Thus, the lack of interest and deserving caring attitude were not present. It has taken its toll in our daily lives for almost 4 years, negating wholesome conscience growth. In fact, all those days and weeks has brought us to emotional quarrels and controversies that are still affecting the nation for the upcoming election of November 2024. The point is this: we are not a united people. We have and still are segmenting our ideals and beliefs like slices of a pizza, in which the stronger get the better piece and the weak, well, the crumbs. To think that not too long ago the world saw us as a giant of strong values and principles of honesty, truthfulness, and above all spiritual strength. We were the founders and warriors protecting, defending the core principles of a harmonious but also a spiritual nation. We were the envy of the world. I wonder what they think of us behind closed doors, or better yet, what do they think of the leadership that allowed personal endeavors to be primordial rather than the pursuit to bring goodness and hopes to the lives of those that have less. And for now, that is the reality of our nation, but fear not, for the divine cavalry is within sight, and it is coming with a determination to uproot the dark side of this beloved nation as well the rest of the world. Until then, raise your head to the sky and see the vastness that awaits all of humanity toward not only the freedom of a planet but also a cohesive humanity where unity will be as the air we breathe. Stay tuned for more that follows in next article. I leave you with this thought: if God is all unconditional love, isn't peace equally unconditional? Think of it for a while and you will understand what it is to be awakened, for that is where humanity is heading, and the presence of the chosen ones to lead humanity out of the snares of the current dark forum.